You'll please stand and join me in the flag salute.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I want to remind you, if you are planning to address the board, you'll need to sign up with our clerk, Ms. Cindy Hutchings, at the end of the board table, and there is a 5-minute limit for those remarks. Before I consider a motion to adopt the agenda, Dr. Gist, are there any changes to the agenda?
We do not have any changes tonight, Madam President.
Excellent. I'll entertain a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
I'll call for the vote. Ms. Shelton?
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Welcome, everyone. Again, thank you so much for joining us on this freezing cold night. I have a package of wet wipes in my car because I have 4 kids, and it's totally frozen. I spilled coffee on myself. I had an opportunity to find out really quick how cold it was. So, yeah, it's cold. We have several guests in the audience this evening. Thank you all so much for joining us. Dr. Gist, you want to tell us a little bit about who's here?
Sure. Well, there are a number of people here, of course, but in particular, I want to just acknowledge our friends from TypeRose, the Tulsa Young Professional Organization. Perhaps if each of you could stand so we could sort of see the folks who are here from TypeRose. Includes Tanner Strum and Maggie and those in leadership positions, but also just members of the organization who took it upon themselves to reach out to say, you can sit down now. Thank you, yay! We're gonna clap for them now. Yay! Who took it upon themselves to reach out and to say, education matters, it matters to Tulsa. There's Tanner. Matters to Tulsa, and TypeRose is all about making Tulsa a wonderful place and keeping Tulsa the wonderful place it is and continuing to enhance that. And they recognize the importance that education plays in that. And so wanted to be here tonight to be a part of the meeting to show their support, but also to learn more. And so we're thrilled to have them and to welcome them here. TypeRose is one of the largest and leading young professional groups in the nation. They provide members opportunities to build relationships with the community, business leaders, and government leaders, and to give a voice to Tulsans from young professionals from ages 21 to 40. And they want to get more involved with local government and education specifically, as I said. So again, welcome. I'm glad you all are here.
Yes, thank you all for being here. Many of us on the board are just a little bit too young to be a member of TypeRose. Okay, yeah. Moving to the superintendent's special presentations and awards. I know we have a few this evening.
We do. So tonight we have a couple of presentations. We're going to start with Impact Tulsa. So Impact Tulsa is an education partnership working with 15 school districts in the Tulsa area, as well as post-secondary institutions and partners from education, business, civic, nonprofit, philanthropy, and faith-based organizations. Their common goal is to ensure all Tulsa area students are guaranteed a high-quality education. And Impact Tulsa partners, what they do is measure what matters, they share best practices, and align resources behind what works to improve student success. Impact Tulsa is one of 70 regions comprising a national organization called Strive Together Network, which supports communities in transforming educational outcomes. So we're so pleased to have Jessica Smith here with us tonight of Impact Tulsa. She's going to be explaining how they've been supporting Tulsa Public Schools with a very specific project around pre-K enrollment. Ms. Smith, welcome. Glad to have you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Gist, President Schreiber, and members of the board for inviting Impact Tulsa to speak tonight about a very exciting partnership with TPS and our pre-K campaign. We are working hand in hand with a wonderful team at TPS led by Chris Cerna, who's in the back of the room. And we are meeting weekly, every Friday, with different partners around the community. We are working with TPS, CAP, and through our work with BEST and Impact Tulsa to work hand in hand to increase the number of students enrolled in pre-K next fall, or this fall, actually. Oklahoma's doing something really well. We are only 1 in 3 states to offer universal pre-K to all of our students, And while other states are grappling to figure out how to fund pre-K, we already have that figured out. All we have to figure out is how to get kids enrolled. Last year in Tulsa County, 1 in every 3 students did not enroll in pre-K. And even if you look at our kindergarten students at TPS this year, 34% of those kids did not enroll in public pre-K last year. So we do have a challenge. You can ask a pre-K teacher what is important and why I should enroll in my kid in pre-K, and they'll tell you the academic content is important, but also they'll say social skills and social skills. So the message for our campaign, and we have a broad campaign this year, we're going to be doing billboards, we're shooting commercials, we're doing paid advertisements, magnets, stickers, posters. We're peppering the community with everything we can to make sure that everybody knows that pre-K is for all. And our message is going to be about the value of pre-K. So yes, you can teach your child the ABCs, and you can teach them how to add at home, but you can't teach them how to interact with kids and how to be a member of a community. You can't teach them how to learn how to be in school. You can't teach them how to problem solve from home, and they really need to be in school. So we need pre-K to be the new kindergarten. We need that to be the reason to send your child to pre-K, is that you learn how to be in school so that you can learn in school. And so we need everyone to understand and everyone to share that message throughout Tulsa County. I would like to think of ourselves as barrier breakers. So we're identifying all the different barriers that are stopping parents from enrolling kids in pre-K. And then we're thinking outside of the box about all the different ways that we can break those barriers. So one of the problems with pre-K is that we don't know where kids are. So we have birth records, and then we don't have records for kids until they enroll in school. So how do we get that information? One of the ways is that we can partner with external partners and resources that we could help bring to the table. And one of those ways is we have a MOU that we just got with the health department, and they're going to give us all the addresses for any child in our targeted birth date range that had immunizations at the health department, enrolled in WIC or child guidance, and we're going to do targeted mailings to those families. We're also partnering with Reach Out and Read, and we're going to offer for every child that goes to the clinic, we're going to offer them a special back-to-school book in our targeted birth date range that has information about how to enroll in pre-K and about the value of pre-K. And not only that, but their doctor or their nurse is going to talk to them about the value of pre-K, and that's important because those are trusted sources already in the community. Another trusted source are faith leaders, so we partner with faith leaders to get the word out about the value of pre-K to their congregations. And about how to enroll in pre-K as well. And speaking of trusted people, this year we're going to hire parent advocates and promotores to canvass targeted areas in the neighborhoods that we know have low pre-K enrollment. And so they're going to be a trusted source already within their community that can spread the word about the value of pre-K and help their people actually enroll in the computer, help them do that. So by working with all these outside community partners, we've also been able to identify barriers we didn't even know existed. For example, through our work with the health department, we've found out that parents have, one of their barriers is uniforms. And we all know that every school offers uniform assistance, but if you're new to TPS, you may not know that. You may not know that that service is available. So how do we get parents to know that that service is available to them if they're new to the district, and that shouldn't be a barrier to enrolling your child in pre-K? Or birth certificates are a barrier. So you have to either have a check or money order, you have to wait a week, you have to mail it in, or you have to drive all the way to 51st and 129th, and you have to wait for a few hours in the Vital Records Department to even get a birth certificate. So we have a meeting set up with the Health Department, the Vital Records Department, to see if we can break any of those barriers or think outside of the box creatively about that. And I could keep going on and on about all the different partners and ideas and ways that we're working with TPS this year to increase pre-K, but I only have 5 minutes. If you know a child that's 4 or going to be 4 before September 1st, so you should send them to pre-K or tell them all about enrolling in pre-K. We have a website, prektulsa.com. And if you know anybody that wants to get involved or help out in this effort, please shoot us an email or give us a call. And if you have any questions, I would love to answer them.
Any questions from the board? Dr. Decker?
Thank you, President Schreiber. Thank you, Jessica, for coming tonight. I'm an early childhood advocate myself, so I'm really thrilled to hear all of the massive ways that you're reaching out to get out the information. And I just wanted to add that Georgetown University studied Tulsa Public's pre-K program and followed those same kids into middle school and found and compared those kids who attended pre-K to similar kids who did not, and published a report showing that there are benefits of attending pre-K. So it's not just, knowledge that it must make a difference because we know good stuff is going on. It's really research proven.
Right. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Ms. Smith, for being here, and thank you to you and to everyone at Impact Tulsa for this incredible partnership and for your hard work across the board, but specifically around pre-K enrollment. We are very passionate about it. We want every 4-year-old in Tulsa to be in pre-K, and we will be better off doing that with your support, so thank you.
Thank you.
Hopefully you know that January is School Board Recognition Month. And we've been highlighting members of our Board of Education throughout the month and just trying to lift them up for the incredible job they do, the many hours and the hard work they put in. So many hours that I think so many Tulsans don't even realize is a part of being a member of the Board of Education, the number of meetings and the homework and everything that they have. This is a perfect opportunity for us to recognize that hard work and the commitment of these 7 board members. I hope you have seen those spotlights that we've been sharing on social media thanks to our communications team, and so if you haven't, check them out. We'll be sharing them throughout the end of the month. Each board member tonight will find a certificate of appreciation in your meeting folder, and we're also really pleased to welcome Brandon Oldham back to our meeting from the City of Tulsa to share a special message for each of our board members. Welcome, Mr. Oldham.
Thank you. I'm here on behalf of Mayor G.T. Bynum, who sends his regrets that he could not be here. But I'd have this proclamation I'd love to read to you all.
Please. Thank you.
It reads, whereas school board members are responsible for building and maintaining a structure that provides a solid foundation for our school system, and whereas elected board members fulfill leadership roles and serve as the conduits through which teachers, businesses, and the community demonstrate a care, creativity, and support that leads to high quality, welcoming, and inclusive learning environment for each student in Tulsa. School board members are strong advocates for public education, are responsible for communicating the needs of the school district to the public and the public's expectations to the school district. And whereas Tulsans rely on public education for strong economic health and ensures a prosperous life. So on behalf of Mayor G.T. Bynum, I do hereby proclaim January as School Board Recognition Month. Thank you for all your service.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Oldham. Please pass on our appreciation to Mayor Bynum for recognizing these amazing community leaders and volunteers, and we're glad to have you back and to see you. And Madam President, that concludes our recognition of special visitors here tonight.
Thank you, Dr. Gist. We do have 2 board members missing this evening because this is not our regularly scheduled meeting. Ms. Keller is completing her master's, and she has class on Tuesday evening, so she couldn't be here. And Mr. Percival had a conflict, so sometimes when we move the meeting off of a holiday, which we wanted to do that so everybody would be here, we still get conflicts with the board. But we will be sure and pass on the mayor's proclamation and recognition and all of y'all's thanks to Mr. Percival and Ms. Keller. We'll move on to the approval of the minutes. We need to approve the minutes of the January 4th, 2018 regular meeting of the board, and we'll need a motion to do that.
So moved.
Second.
I'll call for the vote. Ms. Fate?
Aye.
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 Aye. Then we'll move on to the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Before I call for the vote, are there any questions regarding the consent items? Seeing no questions, I'll call for the vote. Ms. Shelton?
Aye.
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 Aye. We'll move to the action agenda now. We have 2 items to consider on the action agenda this evening. Because we need to receive the bids and award the bonds before we adopt the resolution, we will consider item F2, and then we'll move to item F1. Item F2 is to receive bids for the purchase of 27 million combined purpose bonds, Series 2018A, and motion and vote to award said bonds to the lowest bidder complying with the notice of sale and instructions to bidders. At the December 18th meeting, 2017, the board authorized the advertisement of bids for the district's 27 million combined purpose bond, Series 2018A, to fund certain improvements to existing school sites, library improvements, and acquisition of classroom learning materials. Consequently, offering documents and other instructions were distributed by the district's financial advisors to interested financial institutions and broker-dealers to receive bids at 11 a.m. on January 16th, 2018, today. A compilation of the bids received will be presented to the board at the meeting for consideration and action. The action items would be accepting the lowest rate of interest bid to purchase the bonds. And Mr. Rick Smith is here with us from Municipal Financial Services, and he's going to present the record of the bids.
All right. Thank you very much, Madam President. I am pleased to report that we received 6 bids today, which is actually quite a few more bids than maybe we have recently. I think that was really an indication of maybe the beginning of the year, and a lot of the firms wanting to kind of get out of the box early. A summary of those bids is at each of your stations. I would like to apologize for the small print. I'm going to have to work on that. But in any event, the lowest bid was submitted by the firm of Janney Montgomery Scott, and as you can see, their average rate was, or net interest rate was 1.81%. I would point out that from the 6 bids, they were very, very tight. The highest bid was 1.86. So, I mean, if you look from the highest to the lowest, it's a pretty tight spread. We were obviously pleased with that. The school district's strong credit rating, which was maintained at AA from Standard & Poor's, I think also had a role in providing for the strong bids and the number of bidders that were involved in this particular bidding. The rate is a little bit higher than what we had received the last time we sold bonds about 6 months ago, and obviously that's a reflection of the higher rates that have been coming from some of the actions of the Federal Reserve Board. As you know, this was the first transaction that Norberto had been involved in. He was able to have conversations and be involved in the conference calls with the rating agencies and did an excellent job, and I did want to mention his role in this as well. Be glad to answer any questions, but our recommendation is that the bonds be awarded to Janney Montgomery Scott at the rate of 1.81%.
Any questions before we entertain a motion? Seeing no questions, I'll entertain a motion and second to award the sale of the bonds to Janney Montgomery Scott, LLC, the lowest bidder, complying with the notice of sale and instructions to bidders.
So move.
Second?
I'll call for the vote unless there's any questions. Ms. Fate?
Aye.
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 Aye. We'll move to F1 now, where the recommendation is for the board to consider and vote on a resolution providing for the issuance of the general obligation bonds in the sum of $27 million by the school district, authorized in an election duly called and held for such purpose, designating the bonds as combined purpose bonds Series 2018A, providing for registration thereof, providing for levy of annual tax for the payment of principal and interest on the same, and fixing other details on the issue. Are there any questions? Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
I'll call for the vote. Ms. Fate?
Aye.
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 Aye. Before we go on to the information agenda, I always just want to pause and say thank you to the Tulsa community for passing these bonds for us and allowing us to keep the district in great shape. I think everyone agrees one of the best things about TPS is great buildings and great grounds, and that's all thanks to the Tulsa community and its overwhelming support of the district. We have to have in excess of 50% to pass these bonds, and we always get it. And it's just a testament to what public education means to Tulsa, and it makes me feel great when I think about it. Even though all this is technical and sort of after the fact, it's important to stop and pause on it. So big thanks to everyone in Tulsa. I'm going to turn the information agenda over to Dr. Gist.
Thank you, Madam President. I want to echo those words. We are so fortunate to have a community that supports our schools through bonds and in many ways, including through bonds, and having, at this time of year, schools that are warm and safe and dry is critically important, and we're just very grateful for that support. The information items that we bring before you tonight, Madam President, members of the board, and those joining us, are for review by the board. They are not here for action, and any action that would be taken on these items would come at a future meeting when they would be on the agenda as either a consent agenda item or an action agenda item. So tonight they are here for information.
Are familiar. Many of our teachers have gone to the Yale National Initiative before. We've actually been really successful in creating the partnership and relationship and been able to bring an institute here to Tulsa, which aligns with the work that we're doing, aligns really nicely with Destination Excellence, serves as an opportunity for continued recruitment and retention, and provides an opportunity for our teachers to personalize their own learning experiences. So we're grateful for that opportunity. Item G2 is a recommendation to approve the creates and deletions of positions that fall under our Information Technology Department. All of the positions are funded through the Information Technology General Fund budget.
Any questions? Ms. Shelton.
Couple on G1, how many teachers are able to participate in that cohort?
In this current cohort, there are 40.
Okay, and then on G2, correct me if I'm wrong, I was under the impression that creates, deletes had to be budget neutral. So maybe you can correct a misunderstanding on my part.
That is not correct. I think, and this goes to, I think there has been a practice.
Mr. Fletcher, can you lift up your microphone a little bit?
Yeah.
I can't hear you.
So yes, Ms. Shelton, thanks for the question. No, that is, the question on the floor was, do creates and deletes have to be budget neutral? No, they do not.
Any follow-up questions or further questions?
Thank you, Mr. Fletcher, and thank you, Ms. Shelton, for that clarification. Items G3 through G5 will be presented by our Chief Information Operations Officer, Blaine Young. Mr. Young.
Thank you, Dr. Guest, and good evening, Madam President, members of the board. Item G3 is a recommendation to revise the language in Policy 3301, School Year School Calendar, for establishing the school calendars. The policy revisions are to remove language referencing continuous learning calendar schools, since we no longer have those in the district. So that's a cleanup item. Item G4 is a recommendation to approve the length of the 2018-19 school year being calculated in hours as allowed by House Bill 1864. Specifically, the school year would consist of 1,148.67 hours with a total of 168 days of teaching. Using the school hour method of this calculation allows for calendar flexibility, and it does not impact the district average daily membership or the average daily attendance calculations. Item G5 is a recommendation to approve the 2018-19 school calendar itself. The calendar includes 168 days and allows for 5 snow days in the event that we have those. The calendar meets state requirements for professional development days and for parent and teacher conferences. And just want to note for the board that a copy of the 2018-19 calendar can be found in the last page of tonight's board agenda. Chris Cerner, the Executive Director of Enrollment and Student Information, and myself are available to answer any questions you may have.
Just a clarification on G4. This is how we have typically calculated it per hours, correct?
It has been the case for several years now that we have done that.
And does this school year have 5 snow days built in as well?
Yes, it does.
Snow or ice or freezing cold wind chill days?
Yes, whatever the situation may require.
And just for the community's reference, I know we started this year on a Monday, but I believe August 22nd is a Wednesday. So we'll be starting midweek, which is something we had done for several years prior to that, and we'll go back to that.
Yes, I can say we
Can I
heard loudly
ask?
and clearly from teachers about that, and when I was in the classroom the first week of school, I saw very much why we need to have that time built in.
We are a district of continuous improvement.
Yes.
Dr. Decker.
Thank you. So I like that you're calling out a few of the changes or non-changes. Are there any other changes that I should kind of make note of?
I think the calendar in general is very representative of what we've done in previous school year calendars. Ms. Cerner, is there anything to add to that? Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Young, and thank you, Dr. Decker and President Schreiber, for those important questions to make sure everybody understands. This is a big deal when we're setting the calendar for the next year, and everybody wants to know, and so now we have it, and I think good timing, too. It gives people plenty of time to prepare for next year in advance. And so if there are no other questions, believe it or not, that actually concludes our information items for the agenda tonight, Madam President.
Excellent. I hope we have a staff report to fill our time.
We do.
I'm looking forward to it.
Oh, okay. So
We're
now
ready for
start
it.
that. Got it. So staff reports. We do have a staff report tonight. Really pleased to have our Chief of Schools, Dr. Eric Green, along with his team, including Dr. Ebony Johnson, I know we're going to be hearing from, to share with us a very important report regarding a tremendously important and big body of work that we've taken on in the district regarding school culture and climate. And so we are going to dive into this, and we have some information to share with you about what we're working on, some data to share with you about where we are, and to emphasize where we're going. Dr. Green.
Thank you, Dr. Gist, Madam President, members of the board. I'll get us started, just kind of kick off the party here, and then invite my good friend and colleague, Dr. Johnson, to join and share a bit more information about this really important topic. I'm excited to continue this conversation where we kind of started with an exploration of our suspensions and behavior, most especially in our schools, and what's the data looking like on that, and where have we been, and goals, and all those things. Excited to expand on that conversation and kind of raise it a bit from a real close look at behavior and indicators of behavior in our schools to a broader kind of look at culture and climate in our schools, and exactly how does all of our action, what we know to be a part of the critical components of educating our students, all of the relationship building, understanding who we are as individuals, that's our students, our teachers, our leaders, family members, parents, community members, all of those folks come together, work together, how we interact with one another, and how all those pieces play a part in success. And so this evening, really want to focus on a look at climate, but as it pertains to and as it supports academic success, most especially. Last year, our team began the really focused work on the aspect of destination excellence that focuses on building a safe, supportive, joyful learning environment. And in doing so, as you see on the slide here, focused on providing no-nonsense nurturer training and professional development for our staff. We started the really important work of real-time teacher coaching and providing those opportunities for our teachers in particular, but as well as our school leaders to really delve more deeply in the minute-by-minute decisions that are made by staff and especially our teachers to address student engagement in classrooms. We also started the work of building culturally relevant classrooms. Well, didn't start that, but continued and intensified that work. And we'll continue that work, obviously, as it's never-ending kind of bit of work. And again, that kind of harkens back to who are we in the school space, in the learning space. Who are our students? Who are the educators? How do those relationships come together? What do we need to know about one another in order to get into our students' heads and hearts and for us to make the really smart adjustments to our instructional models and instructional practices that will really support student learning. And then as well, building school-wide culture plans, continuing that work and deepening that work to ensure that what we do on a day-to-day basis from a planful perspective, that those things really do lead us to increase student outcomes. So that work, we really began that work as it relates to Destination Excellence last year and continue this year. Why a focus on positive school climate? Why does that matter? Well, for probably several reasons, but not the least of which is increasing attendance and graduation rates. It's very clear that by ensuring that our students are engaged in school, obviously attendance is increased, but also students' chances of growing, developing, and preparing for graduation and beyond. As well, by focusing on a more positive school climate, we are building a safer, a more healthy, a more supportive working environment for our educators. We know that having a consistent and a stable workforce really helps us to double down and deliver on the kind of educational experiences we want our students to have. Part of that work is obviously ensuring that the environment itself is conducive not only for the working or for the learning for students, but also for the work that our staff have to do. And then as well, focusing on positive school climate also matters because in the very end, we're here to ensure that students achieve. And we know that as students are more deeply engaged in the learning process, that they are deepening their understanding of concepts and skills, building those skills that obviously will have the greater student achievement, and we see the through line to students' life outcomes and increasing those. I'm going to pause here and ask Dr. Johnson to join us here at the podium as we look more deeply at some of the learnings and insights that we've had over the past year, as well as some of the work, some of the strategies that we've used, some of the data that we have to share with you, and where do we go from here. And Dr. Johnson, I'll share because she probably won't. Dr. Johnson is standing in for members of her team who are ill and had to be pulled to do some other work. So thank you, Dr. Johnson, for sharing.
Thank you, Dr. Green, and my boss, so thank you. So what did we learn from, let's see here. What did we learn from the 2016-17 school year? We learned several things. We learned that reducing suspensions alone, much to Chief Eric's point, did not support the needs of teachers who face challenging student behaviors every day within their classrooms and in their schools. So what did we attempt to do this year? We attempted to set school site goals to decrease suspensions. So every single principal worked closely with their ILDs in order to set site goals around decreasing suspensions. And we provided direct leadership support that focused on de-escalation strategies. We also learned in the 2016-17 that our students' behaviors had various origins which required specialized training for school leaders and teachers and staff. So this year, we attempted to provide our school leaders professional learning opportunities that were not limited, but did provide the following: trauma-informed practices, social and emotional learning supports, and restorative practices. In addition, we learned that it's important to include various stakeholders in the planning and implementation process of these strategies in order to support a positive school culture and climate. So what did we attempt this year, and what are we doing? We're leveraging our teachers' and staff's access to real-time data through our data dashboards, giving them the access to see this information on a daily basis in order to best help all of us make decisions that can truly support our students' needs. So how do we build a climate for academic success? Well, first, we realized that classroom management alone was not enough. Classroom management strategies alone were helpful for addressing baseline student behaviors only. Classroom management strategies alone are not enough to significantly have an impact on teacher-student relationships, and multiple strategies must be used to support a climate that empowers our students to practice and internalize self-awareness, self-regulation, and responsible decision-making, all components of social and emotional learning. Now, what does the research tell us? The research tells us that studies show that social and emotional learning and culturally responsive teaching practices increase feelings of trust and belonging in schools. It reduces exclusionary disciplinary practices and foster positive school cultures. So I'll get more into exclusionary disciplinary practices. Just for now, I'll give you what I believe my definition of that is. So it's the removal of a student from their day-to-day scheduled classroom environment for disciplinary reasons. So how do we focus on school climate? We look at safety. Schools and school-related activities where students are safe from violence, safe from bullying and harassment. Our focus is on creating strong school culture plans and decreasing those exclusionary practices that I just discussed. Environment. We want appropriate facilities, well-managed classrooms, available school-based health supports, and a clear and fair discipline policy. Our focus is on implementing restorative practices. And then there's engagement. Strong relationships between students, teachers, families, and schools, and strong connections between schools and the broader community. Our focus is on integrating social and emotional learning strategies. So I've mentioned social and emotional learning. I'll give you the proper definition for that. It's the process through which children and adults acquire and effectively apply the knowledge, attitudes, and skills necessary to understand and manage emotions. Again, I must underscore students, children, and adults. Set and achieve positive goals, feel and show empathy for others, establish and maintain positive relationships, and make responsible decisions. I've given you the definition of exclusionary discipline. But in essence, it's when we remove our students from their traditional scheduled classroom environment for disciplinary reasons. Usually that looks like suspension or expulsion. So what does it mean to have restorative practices? Restorative practices is a set of principles and practices inspired by indigenous values used to build community. It's the norms in the school. It's how you do business as it relates to working things out with your students. It's when you respond to harm and conflict while providing individual support for the students that are in need. I'll just jump down to the example here. In the past, responses to student conflicts with other students and teachers and staff, it typically looked like a punitive measure. It left little to no room for reflection, repair, and restoration. Schools are now utilizing restorative practices to foster stronger lines of communication regarding the harm that's done and a collaborative approach to repairing the harm. I also just want to add that this does not void students being held accountable. So let me give you an example. One of the infractions that we struggle the most with in our district is fighting. So we had a couple of young ladies who had a disagreement regarding an item that one of the young ladies thought was stolen. That then led to those particular young ladies then getting their friends involved in that debacle, unfortunately. Once their friends were involved, it then rendered, unfortunately, a brawl between girls. What we found after we peeled the layers back is that, one, the principal was very interested in knowing what we could do to not only ensure that those young ladies knew that they made poor choices, so then to hold them accountable for those poor choices, but to ensure that we restored, we talked about, and figured out what happened so that when those young ladies returned back to school, the environment was back in order for those young ladies to be successful. I applaud the efforts of our school leaders. Many of our school leaders are working diligently and compassionately with our families, our students, to build understanding, provide a reflective opportunity for students, and be strategic about restoring their relationships while holding students accountable, instead of an automatic, in this case, 10-day suspension with little to no opportunity for reconciliation. So what does restorative practice look like in Tulsa Public? In the 16-17, we looked into professional learning opportunities and provided those around building life-altering relationships with students, utilize strategies that improve school climate, de-escalation strategies, and we introduced what's called conflict resolution cards, which is an opportunity for students to understand and manage their emotions by then getting an opportunity to step away from a situation that could render harm. What are we doing this year in addition to 16-17 strategies? We are supporting our schools with how to repair relationships when they've been harmed, relationships between student to student, student to adult, sometimes adult to adult. How to ask and answer restorative questions, and how to transition, put transitions in for students who struggle. So with all that being said, we have so many school leaders who are thinking differently, and we have so many teachers and staff members who are working collectively to make this happen for their schools and realize the value. I'm honored to introduce and bring up Tracy Thompson. She's the principal of Anderson Elementary. She's going to come and speak about the great progress that Anderson has made as a result of her restorative practices efforts. Tracy and her team have embraced the definition of restoration, and as a result, have transformed the overall culture of her school. Tracy and I have known each other for quite some time. I'm so very honored that she's making the changes and setting a fantastic culture at Anderson, hence me being an Anderson student in the past. We were T-Birds. Are you all still the T-Birds? No, I'm sorry. Okay. All right. So at this time, Principal Thompson.
Good evening, Dr. Gist, President Schreiber, and members of the board. My journey into decreasing suspensions and just building the culture of our school began 6 years ago, but it truly began a couple years ago when I was given the data of how many instructional days kids were missing, and that was done at a district leadership meeting across the district, how many days kids were missing instructionally due to suspensions. And it just blew my mind. I knew things had to change, and it hit me all of a sudden. If our motto at Anderson is do what's best for kids and not what's easiest for adults, if you do what's easiest for adults, you're toxic within a month. So if you're truly doing what's best for kids, we need to change our mindset about things. So that's exactly what I did. I went back and I began talking with my teachers. I began talking with the parents. And I began talking with what I'm going to call frequent flyers, my students that I saw every single day for discipline issues, the ones that I had been suspending up to that point quite often, and began saying, what can we do different? What is it that you need? How is this a burden on you as a parent Teachers, what can we do different? How can we look at this different? And it was a complete paradigm shift in our thinking. What we began to realize is kids don't want to be disruptive. Kids don't want to fight. They don't want to do anything wrong. They're coming to school to learn and to be safe and to be loved. So with that in mind, we started putting some things in places, some supports. The teachers realized we were working with Dr. Hudson at OU at the time with executive function, and our focus was emotional control and impulse control. Little kids are pretty impulsive, in case someone didn't know that. So we began working, and he said, kids disrupt class and they have fights when they can't solve a problem. Oh my gosh, how easy is that? One problem can cause a fight, one miscommunication. And if an adult can step in and coach you through that problem, whatever it's perceived to be, it could be my pencil's not sharpened and and I'm gonna melt down because I have no idea what that baby went through that morning or that night before. If we can step in as teachers and say, hey, I see you're getting frustrated, Ebony. What's your problem? How can I help you? Instead of put all that away and watch me, because now we're in a fight. So when we just changed our language and we decided to support kids, sometimes kids were disruptive because they didn't understand the whole group lesson. So we put in a practice saying, hey, as soon as I'm done with this whole group lesson, if you don't understand, please come to my small group table. You can volunteer to come over there, or I can volunteer you to come over here. And I'll explain it again. It's going to be fine. That cut down on a lot too, because now I know, okay, I'm not understanding, but she's going to give it to me one more time or 3 more times, whatever it takes. So that happened, and then the teachers were like, we still have students that are disruptive and can't get it back together, because when you have to get the kid when they're in lockup mode, you have to get them right there, because if you wait beyond that, it's going to be an explosion. So we built in a few things. The first thing we did was teachers look for that lockup mode. The second thing is I built a cool down zone next door to my office. We cleared an office and made it the cool down zone. We put a bike in there and lots of fluffy pillows and blankets. So if a child checked themselves into the cool down zone, they did have to come visit with me or my assistant principal or the counselor before they went back to class. Teachers became coaches, peers became coaches. Some of the kids started then recognizing, oh, my friend's having a hard time, I'll help them. In the classroom, they have cool down zones. We also have buddy teachers and teachers that have built relationships with students in the past. They'll go back to them and just say, I'm having a really hard time, and they help them with whatever their problem is in that moment. We built a Zen zone, is what we call it. It's for a child that is having a really hard time and is going to need a little extra time out of class. And when I say a little extra time, it's about 30 minutes. They go and they play, and I have a teacher's assistant in there, and she just sits down with them and draws or colors, and then they begin to talk, and she coaches them through the problem. And then she'll bring them back, and she'll be their advocate to the teacher, saying, this is why they had to come, and this is what we need to do for this child. And then during our specials time, we also built in a movement room that I have a TA that is trained in yoga and movement, and it's the recess curriculum program, and she's able to really work with some kids that have had a lot of trauma to kind of restore their thinking and just being able to put them in a place where they're able to learn. As a result of all this, we have 0 suspensions in a year and a half. I stopped having frequent flyers, so now I just have to go check on them in class, because we had some pretty strong relationships. They told me I needed to build in positive referrals, which we did, so now they can come see me when they're doing something good. The teachers have stronger relationships. And they'll even say things like, oh, this child really tried to get out of class today, but I just met him and talked with him, and I was like, oh, wow, that's great. We've gained so much more instructional time, and every adult became a coping skills coach. I knew I was on the right track when I had some boys come into my office that had just had a fight. They were very, very angry. And one of them said, well, I guess we're getting suspended. And I said, no. I said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to calm down first, and then we're going to talk to each other, which we did. And they realized it was a miscommunication that started the fight in the first place. But I said, that's not where it ends, guys. Now that we've said sorry to each other, we have to understand that that fight affected our entire culture. Your parents, your teachers, the student body, me, because I'm really embarrassed now. So we have to write a bunch of apology letters. And until those letters are done, you got to sit here with me. Oh my gosh, they begged to be suspended. It's like the worst thing in their life, but they did. They sat and they wrote the apology letters, and then they took the apology letters and they read them to the appropriate people. And as they left the office, took a few hours to get all of that done. As they left the office to go back to class, because my teachers will accept students back. We have a clean slate every 5 minutes, is our motto. As they left, the kids, one of the boys said, oh, man, I'm gonna tell everybody not to fight now. This isn't even worth it. So I feel like we might be on the right track. Thank you.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Principal Thompson. We're now going to jump into some of our data around suspensions. So you'll see based on this slide that our current data as of December 1 indicated that we had 1,723 suspensions, which are down 48 from last year. So very proud of the fact that our suspensions numbers are down, but we have seen an increase in the number of days. So you'll see that we are at 8,277 days, which is 1,337 more days than there were last year. An increase in days just indicates that we did have some suspensions that were more on the top tier level, which would be a level 300 and 400 level suspension, which typically warrants more days out of school. I'll give examples of those type of infractions in just a little bit. You'll also see from our data that we are measuring our 17-18 goal around the number of unique students that are being suspended. So if we take a look at the 2015-16, you'll see that we had an 8.8% of unique student suspensions. So that's John and Mary and Lakeisha and Joey, individual students. In 16-17, that decreased to 7.8. And then in 17-18, same time, December, we were at 3.6. And our goal is to reach 6.1 by the end of the year. You can see there our total numbers of suspensions and then our days suspended. So just to capitalize on this information, our unique student suspended looks at individual students being suspended, which is a stronger measure to determine the number of individual students affected. And then our total suspensions are the total number of individual suspensions. All right, we'll get into that in a little bit.
Dr. Johnson, can
Yes.
I just really quickly, the board was accustomed last year to us reporting on the increase or decrease in the number of unique suspensions. So just to put a fine point on that, we shifted a bit, as Dr. Johnson explained, to understand both unique suspensions, so each incident, and then the number of unique students being suspended.
All right, so as you can see here, as of early December, TPS had suspended 3.6% of students across the district. This is about even with where we were this same time last year, but our high schools are far ahead of last year's pace. And again, it's due to level 300 and 400 suspensions that took place more towards the beginning of the school year, which rendered a lot more days out. You'll also see here the trend data. You'll see that for the most part, from 15-16, our unique student suspensions have decreased, with the exception of where we are with our high school. Also, our suspension rates vary depending on the school, and it's typically higher at our secondary schools. So you'll see the elementary, middle, junior high, and high school. Those are all those lines are representative of various schools in our district. And you'll see that certain schools choose and work hard, much like what Principal Thompson mentioned, to have no suspensions. And then we have other schools that are utilizing suspension as a measure and as an intervention. We also see that our students in 7th, 8th, and 9th grade are suspended the most and have a higher number of severe infractions. The great thing about us being able to look specifically at this data is that it actually gives us the information that we need to know how to proceed in future with supporting our young people at the junior high, middle school, and 9th grade level. I also just want to give a little bit more information about this. So again, the majority, based on this data, you'll see the majority of our suspensions reside in our level 200 and 300. So I'll break that down for you as far as our actual infraction codes. So for an example, a level 100 would be like refusal to serve minor sanction. So that would be a student that you say, young man, I need for you to come here, show me your badge. And he says, no, I'm not showing you my badge. And then you say, I'm sorry, young man, please come here. I need you to show me your badge, and then I'm going to escort you down to the main office. And this young man chooses to not only not show you the badge, but he walks into whatever direction that he wants to go in. That's refusal to serve minor sanction. That's a level 100, not suspendable. Level 200 is fighting. So, of course, I don't need to explain. That's two people who make a decision, who make a poor choice to fight in school. Level 300 would be like abusive language. So that's when profanity is being used. And then level 400 is more of abusive behavior. So that can be threatening behavior, that can be physical towards another person. So you'll understand the different levels. So students' perception of safety are fairly related to their school suspension rates, but there is a wide range of school context. So when we looked at our social and emotional learning data, which came from our Panorama survey, it was evident that our elementary school students, they have a higher feeling of safety and lower suspensions for some, and low suspensions, but not always feeling of safety for other schools at the elementary space. But our secondary sites, which are our green and blue, we learned that there are more towards high suspensions and a little bit more of a low safety. But then some of our secondary sites feel like there's high safety as well, but then also high suspensions. So you can see that data there. Those dots are all representative of our various schools. We've also found that elementary students feel a stronger sense of belonging at their schools, and they're typically suspended less often, but this changes once they hit middle and high school. And so then again, our work is around how do we best support our students in transitioning from feeling safe and feeling like they belong at the elementary space and at the elementary sites, and then making sure that we truly adapt those things that are happening at the elementary site for our secondary schools as well, and making sure our students feel good about school and they feel a sense of belonging, hence then decreasing their opportunities to have infractions and be suspended. We also see here that our elementary students have a stronger teacher-student relationship than our middle and high school students. You'll see the scatter plots of red dots, which indicate our elementary schools that feel that are not suspended as much, but they have very strong relationships with their teachers. And then in our secondary sites, it kind of falls off a bit. And again, just more data to let us know where the work and the support is needed the most. But very proud of our schools at the secondary site who work hard in order to foster relationships. We just definitely want to take those exemplars and spread that to even more of our secondary sites. So what are next steps? I'll close just by saying that we have a plan. We are going to provide direct support for our teachers and staff regarding restorative practices. We're going to ensure that there's an establishment of a cross-functional team with a focus on clear implementation. We're going to put in guidelines for restorative practice for all school-related settings, so it's not just going to be the responsibility of one department or the schools to implement restorative practices. We can implement restorative practices across various departments in our district. So for an example, our bus drivers, we will want to ensure that they're familiar with what it means to bring students in on the bus, restore them, making sure that they have a relationship and the students have a sense of belonging even through their ride on the bus. Just ensuring that when our students do encounter someone in authority, whether that's an officer, a school resource officer, or anyone, that that adult knows how to actually interact with that student in a positive way by restoring and having good positive interactions with them. And we're also going to have site-level support teams that increase the internal capacity of our schools. With all that being said, I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to share all of the work that we're doing in Tulsa Public Schools around school climate. And just know that it's taking all of us collectively to make this happen. And so please let me know if you want any more information. You can contact my office, but thank you so much.
Before we take questions, if you don't mind, just just a small point here. I do want to clarify that our schools they've always retained the option of suspending students. That has never gone away from our schools, our school leaders and teams. What Dr. Johnson and what Principal Thompson have just shared are our efforts to help us to explore other ways of addressing misbehavior, other ways of understanding students before they make bad choices, and helping them the students to make better choices, but as well for us as adults to think more expansively about how we respond to those and what messages we send and that. So proud of what Principal Thompson and several other schools have done in the last year plus in thinking about our response to negative behaviors, but thinking even more broadly about what is the culture, what's the climate that we want and need in our schools, and what messages are we sending before students make decisions that they do, and what messages do we send when they do sometimes make bad decisions. What are the messages that we send to those young people and to their families about the continuous improvement and the continued learning process? The learning is even in the restorative and the consequences that we give to students. So just wanted to stress that it's a messy bit of work. There's no magic potion or magic pill that we just give. The work that's happening at Anderson, that didn't just happen. That's ongoing work. You heard her say that they've had fights. It's not that kids are not fighting or kids aren't making bad choices. It's how are we working through those choices that students make, and how are we making sure that the ongoing learning is what we want to have happen in our schools. I'll pause there.
Ms. Marshall has a question, I know.
Really don't have a question. I just wanted to thank you, Dr. Johnson, and just wanted to congratulate Principal Thompson. I've had an opportunity to visit Anderson on numerous occasions and to actually see the work in progress. And it's an awesome sight to see the de-escalation methods that all of the staff, including Principal Thompson, they utilize just walking through the halls when they see a conflict arise between students, or they see a student in distress. I've had an opportunity to watch them. I've watched them in the cool down process, and even in the yoga room. They invited me to participate, but I thought I'd get down and not be able to get back up. And that would be a whole different effort to cool down. But I just wanted Principal Thompson and for you and Dr. Green to know that that is an awesome program, and I really enjoyed myself numerous times I've been over there to actually see the work in progress. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Marshall.
Ms. Fate?
Would it be possible for us to get a copy of where the dots are with names, so we get the names of the schools to see?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Thank you also for the incredible report.
Dr. Decker?
Hi, Dr. Johnson. Yeah,
Hello.
I really loved this messy, hearing about this messy work. I liked that description of it. And I just wanted to say that, you know, relationships are key to learning. All of us that have gone far in education know that, and remember our teachers and our peers that pushed us.
Yeah.
And these relationships are really important, even for those who have trouble controlling themselves. And some kids are just born with it, and others live in trauma and really need help, and or parents that aren't modeling it for them. And I personally wish that I'd been taught how to manage disagreements. This was never something somebody coached me through. It's just something I've learned to do and I'm still learning to do. So I love that it's becoming a domain in our school districts, that people are learning how to teach this skill, because it's so important. I also loved the panorama data in that way, as did Ms. Fate. Obviously, she called it out. Seeing those correlations is really informational, and I'm sure actionable. But I, of course, want to add a question about the data.
Sure.
Yeah, as I was listening to Principal Thompson, I started thinking about whether there's any data on the bad choices or the infractions, whatever we call them, that are not leading to suspensions. So we can get an idea on if our total number of infractions are decreasing, really, or whether we're kind of flipping, and there might be a transition time, of course, where this is all being experienced. But I just thought that might be an interesting additional data point as we're learning to work through these things.
That's a great question, Dr. Decker. I will just say that through our work with our data and analytics team, we're really proud of the intervention dashboard that's been created. I'm not sure if that's been introduced yet to you formally, but basically it gives schools an opportunity to go in and document all of the interventions that they are putting in place that are not exclusionary practices where students are then put out of school. So in addition to that, we've been also documenting that information into our all of our suspension systems, and so we're just glad to know that there is a way that we can actually document all the great things that schools are attempting to do before they actually suspend a student. So yes, we are now starting to better collect that information where we know some of the strategies, and there's a lot of them out there that schools are employing in order to keep students in school every day.
Just to say a little bit more about that, Dr. Decker, we haven't had great data there previously because schools had different practices, and the way in which referral is documented or not at different schools just varied tremendously, and so we didn't have super strong data. So the dashboard itself is both an effort to make that data more usable for our teams, but also to provide more consistency of collection across the district.
Yeah.
Dr. Johnson, I too want to thank you and the district for really engaging in this hard work and changing people's perspectives and just not going about as business as usual, but taking a hard look at it and really being transparent about what works and what doesn't work. I really appreciate that. I have a very technical question.
Sure.
You mentioned in the behavioral response plan we have different levels of suspension, and I think that you said, and I thought maybe the public might have lit on this, so I wanted to have you elaborate on it. But for example, a level 200 is fighting is an example of that, but verbal abuse is a level above that at a 300. Is that what you said?
Yes, that is correct.
So can you elaborate on a little bit about how that works, and like what are some examples of those kinds of things? Because I think immediately people would think, really? Why would those not be on the same level, or what differentiates them and why?
Okay, I'll reserve my ability to speak on that to Deputy Shannon.
I was
or do
just
you
going to
want me
say,
to?
describe it the way you described it to me with those
Okay.
very concrete examples, because I got it. I was like, oh, okay.
Okay, so I'll just tell you how that actually came to be in our behavior response plan. Every year we analyze our BRP in order to determine the fairness of infractions and what should warrant certain days out and how many and so forth. So it was a collective of principals that came together and teachers that looked at the infraction of fighting. And what we found was that we have a spectrum of fighting that's happening in our schools. So we have 5-year-olds who get upset over who took whose toy, to students who play fight, to students who actually plan and have a bona fide. And so what we realized was that to make that a level 300 where students are out for more than 10 days of school was excessive when we have moved towards a restoration of what harm has been done and figuring out how can we then ensure that those two students have had an opportunity to communicate and figure out who did what and what happened, and then how can that not happen again while reducing their number of days that they would normally be out of their educational setting, if in fact they're able to restore that. As it relates to verbal abuse is what you mentioned. So verbal abuse could look like a teacher, it could look like a staff member being profanity used towards that staff member and or teacher, and so that infraction then warrants a different level of consequence.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. Ms. Shelton.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. And I appreciated the acknowledgement of we learned that reducing suspensions alone is not enough. We need to also support the needs of teachers. I know we got a lot of feedback on that, so I appreciate that your team is working on that. And slide 18, looking at all of the schools by grade level, we have some schools that are suspending at much greater rates than others. So I wanted to clarify, are all school leaders supposed to create a goal around decreased suspensions in their site plan, and then is it an opt-in for having PD on restorative practices, or are all school leaders receiving that training?
Yeah, so all schools have created both attendance and suspension decrease goals, increase in attendance and decrease in suspensions. But what we found is that this is a process that's going to take, all of us time for everyone to be on the same page about what it means to truly understand restoration and restorative practices. Is not an overnight thing with our schools, our school leaders, and just ensuring that our teachers truly understand as well. And so in the past, we have rendered restorative practices training for our deans of students, as well as some of our assistant principals have received formal restorative practices training, and then some of our teachers received it as well. We are working now towards what that's going to look like at scale for our teachers in future, for them to get a lot more in-depth training on restorative practices.
And just as well, as you know, Board Member Shelton, schools start at different places, and so we're tracking kind of, they're setting goals based on where they were, obviously, and decreasing from there, and we're tracking and supporting them based on the realities of kind of where they've been in terms of climate and suspensions and all of the infractions that happen. Yeah.
Thank you so much, board members, for those very important comments and questions. Dr. Green, Dr. Johnson, just appreciate your hard work and your leadership and that of all the members of your team. And of course, Principal Thompson and all of her teachers, and the really impressive work that is happening at Anderson. But there's great work happening in many schools across the districts, and you can see that in the data itself, and something exciting is happening. Just so many positive things that are happening. At the same time, we know we have still a lot of room for improvement, and that's what the goal setting is about, and the continued professional development and so forth. I also just want to acknowledge, I mentioned briefly my very brief classroom experience at the beginning of the year, and my colleagues are here. My friends from Marshall, including Ms. Curler, who is now with our third graders, but also Ms. Gate, who is on the teacher advisory cabinet, and Ms. Esraz and Ms. Pepper. And so we have teachers who are here tonight. I don't know if you're part of Type Rose or exactly, but we're glad to have you. And I want to just say that I learned so much from you all, and it was not long enough, and I'm sure it was a tiny sliver of all that you do, but to watch, to experience how hard it is, and then to watch it being done in a way that makes it seem like magic or easy by these incredible professionals. I just want to call that out, and another example of a team that's just doing great work there. So thank you, glad y'all are here. And that concludes our staff report.
Do we have any board member reports or concerns? Dr. Decker.
Yeah, thank you. So the public may remember that the board took on modifying the superintendent evaluation tool. We wanted it to be aligned with Destination Excellence, our strategic plan, and we also wanted it to be more ongoing and transparent. I'm also going to add that I think it's going to be more actionable also. So I just wanted to say we are in the thick of the mid-year review process with Dr. Gist. So the board members last week reviewed various artifacts and completed the tool. And this week we're in one-on-one conversations with Dr. Gist on that feedback. And in February we'll be going into executive session to provide collective feedback and also allow time for summarizing and follow-up. So I just wanted to make it clear that we are following the plan that we had talked about a few months ago, and it's going very well.
Thank you, Dr. Decker, and thank you for leading that work for the board and helping us get that done. I had my one-on-one with Dr. Gist, and I just remarked at the end that it's really a modernization of the process, and it's pretty excellent, and it's also good on the trees because we used to get this giant notebook of kind of all of the different reports that we've had throughout the year so that we could refresh our memories, and now we're able to do that digitally. So it's just a really modernized process, and I think it's going to work well, and it also provides for multiple intervals of feedback, whereas in the past we were just rushed and did it sort of at the end of May. So I think it's something that is really progress for the district, so I'm happy that we were able to do that. I will quickly do a report unless anyone else has a report on a committee. So the Community Advisory Council met again last Monday, so that's the meeting that we mentioned that they would have at our last board meeting, and they worked on refining some of the points that they want the board to consider as it considers whether or not it will change some of the school names. And a draft of that report is going to be posted on the TPS website at about the end of the month, and we will make sure that everybody knows about that, because that'll be an opportunity for the community to provide feedback and make any corrections on any kind of data or information that's in there. So if there is something about the Suzanne Schreiber School and you happen to know that that was your great-grandma and you want to make sure that you know that she was born in Tulsa or whatever it was, you'll have that opportunity. So please be looking out for that document. We'd love for everyone to review it and look at it. And you can also watch the video of the highlights from the meetings there. And then also last week on Thursday, we had one of our equity series meetings, and that was very well attended. I know Ms. Shelton, Dr. Decker, and I were all there, and various members of the community. It was really well attended, and we had a great panel who I think was pretty impressed with the audience's engagement. We usually have conversation where the panelists comment on a few things, and then some time for table talk where you write down questions that you have out of this and things that you want the panelists to comment on, and then the facilitator asks those questions. And the feedback was that I think the panelists really enjoyed the engagement and the level of participation. So proud of the Tulsa community and looking forward to, I think we have like 3 or 4 more of those series, and they're here, and you can have free dinner too when we have those. So that concludes my report. And then we will move on to the citizens' comments, which we don't have any this evening, and then Dr. Gist will give her report.
Thank you, Madam President. So yes, the work of the Community Advisory Council does continue, and I think that as President Schreiber shared, there are really important steps that are continuing to happen. Just a reminder to the community that this work that we took on here was about so much more than just support for the Board of Education and the ultimate decision about school names, but it really is modeling for our students what it means to be lifelong learners and being lifelong learners and embracing that and understanding that as individuals, as members of this team, and as a community, we have still so much to learn. And so I know, having been able to participate, it's just been very valuable for those who've been able to participate. And our goal is to try to make sure that we're sharing what's happening more broadly with the community so that we can all be learning. So in that spirit, President Schreiber mentioned the video. We'd actually like to go ahead and share it with you for those of you who haven't had a chance to see it or will have a chance to see it again, to see just a snippet of what happened at our last Community Advisory Council meeting.
Very exciting to see the committee being so engaged and honest and open.
Well, it's been a substantial
this undertaking of reviewing the names and the values of TPS and how the history behind each individual that a building is named after and how it reflects in the values of TPS today. One of the takeaways, or a reminder I should say, is the complexity of the individual, of history, and that this is not an easy, quick fix.
It's very, very hard to determine motivation when you're talking about something from a historical context that happened 100 years ago. But context really matters. So you can ask, why could this name have possibly been considered at that time, and begin to look at the historical facts.
Ensuring that everyone throughout the process feels respected and feels like their voice matters and that is heard.
We sort of close these meetings with a single word about how you're feeling, and the word hopeful came up considerably more today than it has in previous meetings.
So thanks again to those who are helping to pull these meetings together, and again to our communications team who always does such a great job there. Before I have some final remarks for tonight, I want to just acknowledge the many events that occurred over the weekend with Martin Luther King holiday. I want to acknowledge a few people, starting with our board member, Ms. Janetta Marshall, who gave some very powerful remarks at the Interfaith event on Sunday night at Boston Avenue, and was very moved and impressed, and I know everyone there had the same experience. So thank you for those words and for your leadership. Also, all the members of our team who worked so hard to pull together our involvement in the Martin Luther King Day Parade. Sue Ann Bell, Jason who's here, Anne Marie, everyone on the team, fail to recognize everyone. And of course, Charlotte Manning, who leads the dance team, which I'm very proud to be a member of. And just our team goes above and beyond for that event and truly takes to heart the meaning of that event and why it's there. It's not just a parade, it's about the message behind why we recognize Martin Luther King Day every year and what that means to us and what it means to our work on equity here in the district. You know, on religious holidays, so many of us have family and faith community practices of rereading stories that are important to us related to that holiday. And on the 4th of July or Independence Day, I'm sure some of you join me in rereading the Declaration of Independence. Raise your hand if you do that. Come on, geeks, unite. Okay, all right. And then on Martin Luther King Day, I know for sure that many of us reread selections from his writings and speeches. And for me, every year that includes a letter from a Birmingham jail, and I've been to the mountaintop, which was, of course, Dr. King's final speech. I also had the chance this year to, along with other Tulsans at Boston Avenue, to experience our student, she's a student at Langston, but a Tulsa student, Rishala Page Tucker, who beautifully presented the I Have a Dream speech that night, and also was able to hear the keynote address from the Reverend Dr. M.C. Potter, who highlighted many of Dr. King's poignant and powerful words. For me, this year, one sentiment weighed heavily, and I noticed actually among folks I follow on social media, friends and family and colleagues, that I wasn't alone in this reaction. And this year, I saw much more attention being paid by my white friends and colleagues to the concept of the white moderate that Dr. King expressed in Letter from a Birmingham Jail. You know it well, I imagine, but I'd like to share his words because he was, after all, just an incredible writer and speaker. He said, "First, I must confess that over the past few years, I have been gravely disappointed with the white moderate. I have almost reached the regrettable conclusion that the Negro's great stumbling block in his stride toward freedom is not the White Citizens Council or the Ku Klux Klaner, but the white moderate, who is more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice, who constantly says, I agree with you in the goal you seek, but I cannot agree with your methods of direct action, who paternalistically believes he can set the timetable for another man's freedom, who lives by a mythical concept of time and who constantly advises the Negro to wait for a more convenient season. Shallow understanding from people of goodwill is more frustrating than absolute misunderstanding from people of ill will. Lukewarm acceptance is much more bewildering than outright rejection." His words raise, of course, the importance of urgency, the inevitability of disruption that comes with change, the need for those of us who are not people of color to be vocal and active in seeking racial justice for our black and brown brothers and sisters. And this weighed even more heavily on me this year, than in previous readings. And I noticed that I wasn't alone in that. So why? Well, I can only speak for myself, of course, but I imagine that many others had some of the same reasons that I had. We have an urgent need right now for strong words of condemnation of racist commentary and ideology. We have a need for action to combat racism and other actions and words that limit the full rights and human experience of all of those who are not in privileged positions. Sometimes that's obvious, as it was when, or it has been when self-proclaimed Nazis march on American cities in 2017. It's also clear in the uptick in the activities and the emboldened behavior of white supremacists. It is, however, necessary, and perhaps even more so, when racism is less explicit, when it's couched in terms that are code for those who believe in white supremacist ideologies, or when they're excused away as misunderstandings or misinterpretations. It's also less explicit when it's not racism per se, but rather each of our implicit biases that go unexamined. We're working hard, urgently, in fact, in Tulsa Public Schools to improve the educational experiences of all students and to close achievement gaps and other disproportional results for our Black, Hispanic, and Native students. We have also, as I hope you know, embraced equity as our core value, which is evident in our academic work, but also includes an examination of biased and inequitable practices more broadly in our system. And that work is all very important and must continue with vigor and with enthusiasm. But it isn't enough to work for improvement in educational outcomes, and it isn't enough to examine systemic racism in our system. It also isn't enough to understand and work on our own implicit biases. While it all matters, it isn't enough. We have to actively fight racism. We must stand up. We must speak out. We must vote. We must confront. We must march, and we must make change. Tonight, I want to publicly declare my own recommitment to this work. I will fight racism. I will fight racism in all its forms. The future of our beautiful, diverse country, which, even with the contradictions of action that created wealth on the backs of so many, was fundamentally built upon a foundation of equal rights for all, and we must make that true. All across this city, this country and the world for that matter, children of all ages are watching. They're watching me, they're watching you, they're watching TV, print, and social media. They're watching us, and they see. They see what we're fighting against. They see what we're fighting for. They see what we're willing to stand up to confront, and they see when we fail to do so. They hear the language used, and they see the way in which we treat one another. Our children are watching. And people are still waiting. So, to my Black, Hispanic, Native, and Asian colleagues, friends, and family, to our teachers, our principals, to our students, to all people of color, as well as others who are disenfranchised by systemic inequities and by outright discrimination, I say this: I will lead for change. I will fight. I will fight with my work. I will fight with my words. And if necessary, I will fight by whatever means necessary to combat those who want to keep you from experiencing your full rights as an American and as a human being. And that concludes my remarks, Madam President.
Thank you, Dr. Guest. Thank you for taking time to pause and help us all kind of remember about yesterday and just the fight that we're all in and the realities of the day. Moving on, I don't believe there's any non-routine items this weekend. Any new business? Mr. Wade. Okay. Move to the announcements. The next regularly scheduled meeting of the Board of Education will be held on Monday, February 5th, 2018 at 6:30 p.m. in the Cheryl Selman Room at the Education Service Center, 3027 South New Haven Avenue, Tulsa, Oklahoma. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
I'll call for the vote. Ms. Fate?
Aye.
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 Aye. Meeting adjourned.